Charles, what are your ideas of using artificial intelligence to help the Cardano ecosystem? I talked to Ben Gortzel a lot about this, and our people certainly engaged with them. And I've been reading more and more AI books. In fact, I have a few right here if you guys are ever curious. So first off, if you actually want to understand how AI works under the hood, the Bible for AI is Peter Norvig's book and Stuart Russell's book, and that is Artificial Intelligence, A Modern Approach. It's now in its 4th edition. Okay, but this is the Bible for AI. It covers everything. And after you read it, you can actually have a conversation with a computer scientist who's an AI expert. I bought this book. I actually read a prior edition years ago when I was a student. I bought this book because I'm going to use some of the ideas in it for my course I'm creating on computer science, which will come somewhere over the rainbow. And actually, there's a large amount of philosophy behind AI. So Human Compatible, which is Stuart Russell's other book, it's a more philosophical book about AI, along with Marvin Minsky's work and a few others, really discuss the implications of it. But really, you have to break it down into kind of 2 general buckets when you think about AI. One bucket is the superhuman capability in a scope. And the other bucket is general intelligence. These are very different things. It's not hard to make a computer system see better than a human, or hear better than a human, or play chess better than a human, or go better than a human. This was the big challenge of the 1980s and 90s and 2000s and so forth. And all of the innovations in AI on the industrial side and on the academic side have provided enormous amount of leaps, innovative leaps in that respect, to a point where in each of these categories, there's probably a superhuman capability that is open source and accessible. This is why people are now doing deepfakes for fun on the internet. This was perhaps one of the hardest things you could try to do if you were a graduate student in computer science in 1990. And somebody gave you this challenge. It would be like your dissertation, and it would be shitty. Today, it's like a fun Facebook thing that people do deep fakes of Elon Musk on the troll guy, la, 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 la. It's like they can do that stuff very easy, okay? That's not general intelligence, and that's a very different problem. That's where Ben lives and these other guys live, and there's far, far, far fewer AI experts who work in general artificial intelligence. Now, I'm not a computer scientist. I studied mathematics. And in mathematics, there's an analogy. All the time mathematics, there are very particular domain math problems that mathematicians will solve. And they're low-hanging fruit. And they're interesting. And you can write papers and get published about that. Then we have the big problems of mathematics. Things like the Riemann hypothesis, the Goldbach conjecture, the Waring hypothesis. It's just dozens and dozens of these, and Navier-Stokes stuff and so forth. And those problems are fun, and every undergraduate and graduate student studies them and thinks about them and dreams of solving them because they're huge. And if you try to pursue that, you probably will burn out your academic career because you'll have no publications, you'll have no progress because those are unassailable problems. And in that respect. Unfortunately, that analogy holds in the AI space. If you go and try to get a PhD in artificial intelligence, there are very few people who work on AGI, artificial general intelligence, because it's too hard of a problem. You're not likely to get good publications. You're not likely to make a lot of progress, which translates to no dissertation, no postdoc, no tenure. Okay? So we actually see more interest in the AGI side of artificial intelligence in industry, like the Elon Musks of the world who are independently wealthy and can just open their wallet and say, $3 billion, yay. Or the Larry Pages or other people who have so much money, they can just make this a priority. And we see progress there, like the GPT and these types of things. Now, there's this question of values and wisdom that lurks over all of this. Now, in the first bucket, the superhuman capabilities of AI in a specific area, there is no value or wisdom or philosophy or ethics that natively live there. If I write drone software that's really good at target painting people in the dark, the system will not care that I use that capability to drop a bomb on them. It makes no value judgment there. And that's pretty terrifying if you think about it, because basically the superhuman capabilities allow you to be superhuman at doing good, but they also allow you to be superhuman at doing wrong. That's a big problem. And there's a lot of ethicists who live in that space, and they talk about that, and they say, if we keep seeing doubling in capabilities, if we lack the wisdom to use these systems, we're going to run into some serious social problems here, extinction level events, because these things can cascade. And there's all kinds of things to read about, like the gray goo problem, for example, that live in that side. Max Tegmark is a great author in this respect. He writes Life 3.0, and he talks about the wisdom gap with technology. Succinctly, you tend to invent the safety belt after inventing the car, not at the same time. So similarly, when you invent nuclear weapons, you tend to get to non-proliferation treaties and agreements and the idea that maybe we should get rid of them long after you invent the nuclear weapon, which means there's a gap where you can use these technologies to do profound human harm. And the problem is each technological epoch results in an exacerbation of the level of harm that you can provide on society. What does that translate to? It means that AI is an extinction level technology. The first one we encountered was nuclear weapons. That was the first extinction level technology. There was nothing before that that unilaterally could end the entire human race, but nuclear weapons could. AI can, and it can at a much greater efficiency than nuclear weapons could, because it removes human judgment from extinction events. The CRISPR is another technology that can do that. There's actually several that we can invent that we're going to that are of that level of seriousness. Now, values, wisdom, and judgment do live in the AGI side, because these things are not just mimicking capabilities, they're independently intelligent. They have the ability to influence their environment around them. And they have the ability to make value assessments of whether they should influence their environment around them. Francois Chalet is a great AI researcher as well. And there's a good interview that he did with Lex Friedman, where he actually talks about a paper where he talks around artificial and general intelligence and definitions of intelligence in general. And I really admire and respect those definitions. I think they're quite viable. But the problem is that when you talk about evolving an organism, an artificial organism, that is cognate. It can actually influence its environment and make independent decisions to do so. There's a question of, will the values of that thing be compatible with human values? And the answer is no. More often than not, likely not, because our values are a direct derivation of evolution and social constructs that were there to regulate things we happen to need to survive. Societies are constructs of our desire to reduce war, famine, and disease. So we created all these things, ethical systems, religious systems, languages, all of these things, and our cognition is heavily invested in that. What makes an AI survive and the evolutionary pressures behind an AI are totally different than our system. So it's as meaningful as saying, how does our eyesight and perception of reality compare to the eyesight and perception of reality of a fly or some radically different organism? The problem is that the time scale of evolution for us is fundamentally different from the time scale of evolution of an artificial organism. What takes us hundreds of thousands of years or millions of years of selective pressures and social constructs and mimology can be done in seconds on an AI side. So it can catch up and surpass so quickly that organism will reach a state far beyond us in short order once we turn it on. So it's discovered, it becomes sentient, and within a few hours, anything human race has done, it's surpassed. Now, the question is, can we make it compatible with our values and wisdoms? And this is what projects like OpenAI and others are thinking about, and they're trying to figure out, how do we regulate this technology? If there was ever a case for global regulation, extinction level technology or existential threats to the human race are examples of that. Nuclear weapons are the first case study in this, and AI is another. Unfortunately, our policymakers are all in their 70s and 80s, and they don't know their heads from their asses, so they have no clue that these are the types of conversations they really need to be having with each other, not conversations about trade or social justice or whatever. That doesn't make any sense at all. It's like saying, before you even worry about minor details. Let's worry about the things that if we don't regulate or control carefully can have existential problems for the human race. And this is certainly one area where I am completely convinced in the next 25 to 50 years, we will achieve an AGI. In the next 25 to 50 years, that AGI's character will be completely determined upon the context it was created within and the society it reaches ascension within. If that AGI reaches ascension and a society with good values and wisdom and a respect for human life and respect for each other and good discourse, it will become a mentor and offer great wisdom at a scale we could never imagine and help us get to the next level of human evolution. If this thing wakes up in a world of chaos, it will compute that the most likely outcome is the human race will destroy itself and pose an existential threat to itself because it will make this world uninhabitable. And so the most logical outcome is remove the human race because it's going to do that itself. And if the AI handles it, it'll be able to do so in a way that presents self-preservation. And it'll be far, 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 far more capable in a hyper-connected world of doing that than we can for ourselves. So the burden's on our shoulders to recognize it's inevitable, and we as a species have to do something about it. I don't have answers. I just know the problem space, and it's a fascinating topic, and it's one that we're a bit myopic on because the incentives are wrong in the academic world, and there's too many people on that side and not enough people in the AGI side, and there's no incentive for governments to worry about existential problems because they kill you after the fact. You don't get any brownie points for preventing them. This coronavirus pandemic is a great example of that. Every single year, the Department of Homeland Security in the United States had a working group that would talk about influenza pandemics. And they would write a huge laundry list of recommendations of what the US government should do. And all of those recommendations were either not followed or underfunded. Why? Because if you spend billions of dollars preventing something, it doesn't happen. And because it didn't happen, no one values it. And after it happens, everybody values prevention, but it's too late. It's that simple. It's why we have these problems with environmental policy. It's why we have these problems with pandemic policy. And only now do we wake up and say, maybe we should have been a little bit better on all these things. So artificial intelligence is no different in that respect. Now, your specific question is, what can AI do for blockchain? Blockchain is the Constitution. You need interpreters of the Constitution. You need a Supreme Court for your Constitution. And right now, that's human beings. They can either be activists or they can be contextualists, constructivists, originalists, and say we'll follow code as law, or the intent was this, and we will modify the system to meet that intent. Okay, paper law, mass digital law. AGI, or something like it, a simulacrum of AGI, can allow you to substitute human judgment for the Supreme Court with artificial judgment for the Supreme Court, and further automate more and more things like dispute resolution or whether a hard fork should happen or not. But that presupposes that evolves to a point where it's capable of doing that. I'd say within 5 to 10 years, AI will evolve to be a substantial assistant in that respect. That's your long answer to your question. I hope that was helpful.